First off, hair's a mess, UK lockdown, what can you do? Today we're going to be talking about time lapses, how to shoot them, how to edit them, and most importantly, why you'd want to use time lapses for storytelling on screen. So yeah, let's get started. So right off the bat, the equipment that you're going to need is a camera body, a lens, a tripod is a must, ND filters and an intervalometer if your camera doesn't have one built into the settings. By the way, if you either don't have a camera with you when you're out, or you're not interested in using a DSLR or mirrorless body for whatever reason, then there are some really good apps for iPhone and Android that allow you to achieve time lapses right inside of your phone. So anyway, step one, answering the question of why you'd want to actually shoot a time lapse in the first place. There are many reasons why you might want to use this filmmaking tool. To simply show the passage of time perhaps, the contrast between night and day, to visually show the activities of a character or place. Let's look at some examples of these. BBC Sherlock uses time lapses throughout the show. In the show's intro, they use a time-lapse paired with a tilt-shift effect to show the busyness and energy of the city, making it feel small and insignificant amongst the chaotic world of crime detecting that our two main characters live in. It's also utilised to show the speed of Sherlock's mind whilst he's making deductions. House of Cards also uses this effect to help establish the locations throughout the show. Although most of the show is not in fact filmed in Washington, the intro has the audience believing otherwise. Let's talk briefly about pre-planning your shoot. I can't recommend Google Street View and Google Earth enough, as you can get a better feel for the location, and even better, with Google Earth you can see the precise location of the sun at any specific time of day. This is nice to know prior to the shoot, as it sometimes feels like you're fighting a losing battle when the outdoor light is constantly changing. Now there are a couple of different ways to actually go about shooting your time lapse. You could just record a really long video, take it back to your software and speed it up. You know, like Casey Neistat. But wait a minute, I know that that's not why you came here. You came here for those sexy long motion blur trails, didn't you? So the best way to get that is to choose your frame rate first. Let's say 0.5 frames per second. So that's one frame every 2 seconds. So our motion blur is denoted by the shutter speed. Going by the 180-degree shutter rule, we'd have a shutter speed that's twice our frame rate. For 25 FPS, it's a shutter speed of 1/50. For 60 FPS, it's 1/120, and so on. So our shutter speed for 0.5 frames per second is, that's right, 1, as in 1 second. However, I found that the time lapses were a lot more pleasing to the eye when the motion blur was at its maximum. This meant using a shutter of 360, so using the full 2 seconds to have that shutter wide open. Now normally I'm not a fan of this look for standard video, that being 24, 25 or 30 FPS video that has a 360-degree shutter. It just looks kind of blech. But for a time lapse, I think that it looks much nicer in my opinion. But it's completely up to you. If you're using a slightly older camera, then you'll probably have to invest in an intervalometer, which basically just tells your camera when, at what interval, and how many pictures to actually take. Most DSLRs and mirrorless cameras produced within the last 5 years at least will most likely have an intervalometer feature built in. You just have to dig through the menu settings to find it. Oh, by the way, it seems to be a constant thing across brands that the branded intervalometers, i.e. Canon, Nikon and so on, intervalometers are really expensive in comparison to the third-party ones. Honestly, don't bother with the expensive branded ones. I've never had any problems with the third-party ones that I've used, as I guess there's no moving parts, so it's a pretty simple bit of gear. The only thing left to figure out is how many frames you actually want to take. To do this, take the number of seconds that you want the time lapse to last for, so say 5 seconds, and times that by the number of frames that you want your final video to run at. So let's just say 25 frames per second, for example. So we're taking 125 pictures at 0.5 frames per second with a shutter speed of 2 seconds. Also using ND filters, of course. It's worth mentioning that the location that you choose has to be solid, and try not to knock your tripod. Editing is as simple as importing to Lightroom, making your adjustments, pressing Shift, clicking on the last image, clicking Synchronize, exporting and importing to an NLE like Premiere as an image sequence. These will be a series of high-res images, so you've got the option to crop in, or to keyframe some nodal movements, or some simple scaling ins or scaling outs. If you like the video, then don't forget to give it a like. It really does help me out in beating the YouTube algorithm. Comment and let me know if there's any other movies or TV shows that you've seen that utilise a time lapse. Finally, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with all of my future uploads. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.